The decision to make Death End Request Code Z a roguelike is an interesting one. On one hand, it's a big pivot from the great turn-based systems from the first two games, taking some of its unique mechanics like knockbacks and simplifying them into item forms to use on the roguelike map. On the other hand, this simplification works in the way all fun roguelikes do, with a great focus on gameplay, adding in twisted mechanics to the roguelike formula to make it really feel like death is at every turn. With a new heroine for this side story, the gameplay sets it apart where the story feels like a reward for those who played the first two, with the original cast all present, sometimes in ways you wouldn't expect, and a new story ready to bring in timelines, bugs, and codes and mix them into a story in a degraded world. Still, with the visual novel part that might be hit or miss depending how long you like your story events, its 60 hours tell a deep story with familiar faces, and while the main entries might hit bigger strides in visuals and unexpected death moments within the story, the narrative-filled Code Z is still a Death End request that fans of the series won't want to miss. While main characters like Mai and Sheena exist in Code Z's 1.5 version of the universe, Code Z goes with a new protagonist, the spunky pink-haired Sayaka, ready to take on the challenges of the degraded world. Code Z's world is a copy of the original, where all the original characters are living in peace, until one day friend-turned-foe Arata Mizunashi shows up looking snazzy with a band of glitch girls and ready to destroy the world and their peaceful copy of life within it. A reset later in Sayaka and her ability to explore the dimensional voids that Arata opens up makes her the perfect candidate to rescue girls in their bugged-out world, with glitch girls and old friends to find along the way that make for a meaty new 60-hour chapter in the Death End series to add a nice in-between part to an already complex story. Death End Request's previous entries have seen them put their twist on the turn-based system, so setting itself apart from the main entries is Code Z's roguelike dungeon-crawling style, putting the girls in their glitch states into chibi form as Sayaka sets out to fight and rescue them. I love a roguelike every now and then for the familiarity. There are always similar mechanics for upgrading weapons, certain similar items, and that rhythm of using tunnels to take down enemies one at a time across many floors, but I especially love how Code Z handled this side of things by adding in some of its core concepts to make it still feel like Death End Request. One of the coolest parts of Death End Request has always been its transformations, and thankfully Sayaka gets her own special form in Code Z to continue this. Due to the chibi nature of the visuals, there's no overly Moon Prism Power transformation sequence like other Death Ends we're closer to, mostly just a high-quality version of the art flashed on the screen. But gameplay-wise, the powered-up version can be a game changer in later parts in the way it can remove status effects and kill most things in one hit, so while there's no big special attack to celebrate, you can feel Sayaka's power increase, although I would recommend putting her and the glitch girl animations on the show one-time setting, as you'll see that transformation many times in some of the mid-game dungeons. Speaking of glitch girls, likely inspired by the looming nature of some of the enemies in Death End Request 2, there's also a cat and mouse feeling when a powerful glitch girl appears on the floor, usually one who's decided to chase Sayaka as part of the story. Not only is it nice to have these moments tied into gameplay, these girls can be tough to beat, handing out status effects and even one-hit kills in later dungeons. Fortunately or unfortunately, most problems in Code Z can be solved by causing confusion with an item which glitch girls and bosses for whatever reason aren't immune to, so in the end I felt Code Z on normal was pretty easy as long as I threw that out and added slow, seal, and immobilization items when I was feeling feisty. But Death End Request is also about hacking things, and these are game-changing hacks, so maybe all is fair in Death End Request and glitch girls after all. One factor that couldn't be item out though was what I consider to be the best mechanic in Code Z, the sanity gauge that's always moving as Sayaka explores these areas that directly strain her mental state. While exploring Code Z could feel like any other roguelike, the sanity gauge puts it on its head to make a long stay in a dungeon make the idea of death loom as it drops, with changes in audio and the increasing pulse playing in the background as Sayaka's vision narrows yours, stressing its urgency. There are ether code items to heal her with, but these are actually few and far between in some dungeons, especially when you can barely see, making one sanity trap able to put Sayaka's mind completely out of whack and needing to use your last one that leaves her mind unprotected for the rest of the trek. It makes for plenty of thrill as you keep moving. You can think you're fine, and then one sanity hit can have Sayaka hitting herself straight into a gruesome death end, hopefully not just from sanity, as if she takes herself down while insane, which she does like to do, you don't get a death point. You can get death points if you get taken down by an enemy stranger though, where you get rewarded with Death End Request signature Death End story events, in some ways more gruesome than ever, with its 18+ rating in Japan and the fact that Sayaka is always killed by strangers strangers, meaning you'll get to hear her dying and being torn apart in almost every way you can imagine, with some extra commentary in a comma space after too, unfortunately without a dub, but one death end will let you know the performances by the Japanese voice cast are powerful to say the least. Once you have points for the death end skill tree, you can give Sayaka that greater edge she needs to survive more often with passive skills, and while some of these are just basic stat boosts, others like taking less damage from glitch girls can be game-changing if that's the wall stopping you from progressing, even if Sayaka has to go through multiple horrors to get it. It's a system certainly not for the faint of heart, but if you like that kind of thing, K-Nanameda's art for these are well worth seeing, and if not, there is equipment to level up too, with bonuses given for if you do it in the dungeon and risk inventory space rather than doing it in the comfort of the cafe. One thing for sure is that Code Z's take on roguelike dungeons does it in a very thrilling and very death end request way that is still ultimately a roguelike, but feels like it has their own twist to add challenge and the heart-pumping feeling to make a thrilling different take on the death end request experience. If you played the other Death End Request games, you'll know to expect a story-heavy experience in Z, but to be clear for those who don't know, the Death End Request games have enough story in them to almost be considered half visual novel, and Death End Request Code Z is no exception, with plenty of long story events to be found in its main events, and side stories that all come together to make another lore-heavy world. Code Z is set in what is called DE 1.5, a recreation of the original world of the main game, but due to it being a recreation, bugs and inconsistencies pop up, with one clear one being how different Arata is, and a smaller one being how characters remember meeting Sayaka at different points, with her own recreation being one of the more interesting parts to hear about in the campaign. Because Death End Request tells a deep intertwining story, I found it important to play every side event, with some of them surprisingly lengthy and revealing big story events that will come into the main story, so I'd really recommend playing those if you want the story to make as much sense as possible, especially as it tries to do a lot in a glitched up world with characters from the whole series. In fact, having so many characters from the whole series makes it a little harder to follow at times. Of course, it was amazing to see some of the girls from the first game in their day-to-day forms and their post-Death End Request 1 relationship with Sheena and the others, but one thing to consider is that the last Death End Request release, Death End Request 2, was in the year that was 2020, or 2022 at the latest if you played the Switch version, and because of the gap between entries and the fact I haven't had a chance to dive back into 2 and get its true ending since, I felt hazy on certain parts that had me confused at times, especially since it was hard to tell if the characters were talking about a problem in the degraded world or just something I'd forgotten. This probably is a game that could have really benefited from a catch-up feature to get refreshed on all the lore of the first two. However, I was still able to get to the end of the story feeling a good sense of conclusion, albeit with some ending gimmicks that I'm sure will be hit or miss, but made me excited for the third entry nonetheless. If possible, or for those who had the first two sitting on the shelf, a playthrough of them together in quick succession could likely solve this feeling. Not to say it's necessary to do this, but in a deep world like this could really make it better. The new cast is charming enough in its own right though. Sayaka fills the role as a charming and cool new protagonist with an interesting and dark arc to follow, and potential variations of old characters in new forms like many of the people working at Sheena's game studio make things have a warm and enjoyable feeling before things go south, with the glitch girls providing plenty of chaos while looking pretty, so there is a lot to enjoy at a surface level with depth to gain as well. I'd say I enjoyed dipping my toe back into Death End Request's interesting world, enjoying rediscovering its deep lore and take on alternate worlds, and I'm curious to see where Code Z will fit into things when the third one comes too. My 60 hours with Death End Request Code Z might have had me wishing I was more in touch with the first games, but also left me wanting more with post-game content for if I ever go back to it. There's a post-campaign story that seems potentially less overwhelming than the second ones, and the different, more punishing difficulties to play with ones like Elite putting you back to level 1 every time you die, so if you're enjoying the Death End roguelike experience, it gives you a few ways to keep playing. I enjoy roguelikes in the exact doses I get them though, which seems to be when a random one pops up once every couple of years. So while I really liked Code Z's twist on it, watching my old footage from the original 2 did also have me excited to run around in a field again, so I think I'll likely replay the series as a whole after 3 instead of just going to Code Z if I had to choose. 3 is supposed to be getting more information later this year, so fellow Death End Request fans can look forward to that, but I'm also glad we got more story and depth added in the meantime in this unique spin-off experience. Death End Request Code Z puts a roguelike twist on the world of death ends and dark stories that fans of the series love. The roguelike pot has thrilling twists thanks to its sanity mechanics that make running through dungeons keep the intensity of previous entries, and the story comes with a lot of ambition as it touches timelines. Just keep in mind it might remind you how long it's been since the first two. As a fan of the series, I had a good time experiencing this world again, and as someone who likes the occasional roguelike, it scratched that itch for me in a way that Death End Request only could, to make for a heart-pounding dungeon crawling experience. The story has me super excited to see where Death End Request will take us next time, and how its big group of characters and lore will contribute to this even more fleshed out world. But for now, I'm glad for the in-depth story this entry gave in the latest heart-pounding Death End Request story. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried Death End Request Code Z, and if you have, what did you think of it? You can like and share this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel for more JRPG content like this, and ring the bell to get notifications on whenever I post so you don't miss a thing. You can check out more videos here, and you can find me on social media on X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at JRPG Jungle. Links to those will be in the description below. Thank you to Idea Factory for the code, and until next time, thank you, bye!